Before we get started with today's episode, I just wanted to quickly thank every one of you that's listening to this episode and that has paid attention and listened to the previous episodes in the lead up to this year's TSF Team Champs. It's obviously been a huge effort on my end, getting all these interviews done, but it's been really rewarding knowing that a lot of the coaches, lifters, fans, family, and friends are listening to these episodes, enjoying them, getting something out of them. Team Champs is something that's obviously very close to my heart, and I've put so much energy and so much time into it, not only this year, but in many years in the past. And so if you've enjoyed these episodes, please try to come along to our competition this weekend. Bring your friends, bring your family. Spectator entry fee is the number one way that we generate revenue for this event and that we make back a lot of the costs that are incurred. And it would mean a lot for me to have as many people there as possible supporting both yourself, your teams, your coaches, and just the whole community. So thank you very much for that. It's also worthwhile that I mention our major sponsor, Symmetry Physiotherapy, who I've named and mentioned in basically all the previous episodes recently. Symmetry Physiotherapy have a number of offers on, including 25% off for myotherapy, 25% off for physiotherapy. They'll be there on the day of the competition as well, so you can speak to them there if you want to book in a session in the future. We've been working closely with them at TSF for a number of years now, and it was a very natural fit for them to come on as a sponsor. So thank you very much and enjoy this episode with Alex Hayes. G'day everyone, and welcome back to our final pre-competition podcast. We are 2 days out from TSF Team Champs, so if you're listening to this, odds are you're listening to it before the comp because it would be a bit strange if you listened to this after the comp, to be honest. I'm joined by the reigning champions, the coach of the reigning champion team, Alex Hayes of Process Powerlifting. Good afternoon, Alex. Good morning.
Thanks for having me, man. Let's do this thing.
Absolutely. We've done a few of these podcasts before. Last year, obviously in the lead up, we've had chats about nationals, post-comp, pre-comp. So I think it's going to be a good episode today. You're joining us again after last year's huge success from the Challengers bracket, took out the win. And you're bringing back your team this year, hoping to go 2 from 2, hoping to go back to back.
Yeah, we are. I think going into last year, there was like no pressure. And it was kind of just like, hey, we're happy to be back in this because Team Champs is something that I've loved since the inception. And then with all the federation splits and all the rest of it, we missed out until last year when you guys came back to the IPF and the whole of Melbourne came back to the IPF. So coming back last year was like, it was like a bit of a celebration of like our unity again and all that kind of shit. And just like really happy to be involved. Going into last year, I definitely didn't think we would win, but a few things went our way. On the day, we got a bit lucky. Day before, had some good performances, and obviously scored enough points, but stuff had to go our way for us to win. Whereas I feel like this year, again, stuff really has to go our way for us to win. But last year, I felt like we weren't really spoken about as a team that was a chance to win at all. Whereas this year we've kind of got that target on our back, and a lot of the other coaches have mentioned us as a potential winner. So I feel like there's more pressure on us this year. But yeah, I think we're ready for it.
As you mentioned that last year felt like a little bit of a reunion back of the numerous federations and, kind of getting that community back together in that sense. And I think that's one of my, personally, as the meet director, favorite things about the comp is that it brings everybody together. By definition, you have all the different coaches and stuff, and like any reasonably experienced coach will tell you, in the warm-up room, you end up just chatting to a lot of the other coaches and rubbing shoulders with them and, creating those connections, but never more so at an event like Team Champs where you're kind of like all forced to come together. You come across for 2 days. It's a little bit like a nationals event where, you're seeing your mates again and again for a couple of days in a row. But especially felt like that last year when it was the first year that we ran Team Champs back under the APA/IPF umbrella. And as you mentioned, last year, no pressure. You guys were in the Challengers bracket because it was your first year in the run. Although I do think you were one of the strong teams. Like I think a lot of people were looking at Process, but understandably, Compound were one of the favorites, big time. And interestingly, both you and Compound finished 1 and 2 from the Challengers bracket, which kind of like goes against the whole system and the way it's supposed, quote unquote, supposed to be. But as you and I spoke about the other day privately, over time, I think that's going to like iron out, and those kinks are going to iron out. And in the same way that the way I think of it is in the same way that at a local comp, it's not uncommon to see the 63 kilo woman out totaling the 76ers because there's just not a lot of depth. Whereas at national, that doesn't really happen. Similarly, I think as this competition becomes more and more competitive, those types of those types of, outlier. I call it an outlier, even though it's happened twice in a row, where the winning team was from the challenge bracket. Those type of outlier events are going to happen less. But anyway, back to last year. Yeah, you guys did great. You finished clear, and I actually remember that Apex were a team that nearly pipped you guys if a couple of their results went their way. It was your first time back at Team Champs after maybe 2019 or something, and you guys lapped it up.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, I love Team Champs. It's my favorite event of the year. And, I say that as someone who brings a good-sized team to nationals, mega nationals, all the rest of it. And, yeah, this is my favorite. It's my favorite event.
You guys actually did a preview show on your own podcast. So if you're those that are listening here, you should be subscribed to Lift Talk. So you would have already seen that you, Calvin, and Claudia did a preview episode on Lift Talk, 35-minute discussion. It was great for those especially who might not really understand the system of Team Champs, because Calvin, this is his first experience, which we're going to touch on in a second. But Calvin, your other host, one of your lifters, he's never come to a Team Champs before. So he had a lot of, very beginner-like questions, not beginner-like, but outside the loop questions about how it all ran. And that was really good listen to as well.
Yeah, and I think he'll probably want to bring his own team next year, which is cool. So we'll get a little bit of a taste of it this year as a lifter. And then I think he'll probably bring his own team next year. So that'll be sweet.
Well, now's probably a good time to segue into introducing your team. Process Powerlifting back for another year. Had a few shakeups, had one nomination change. Some of these things had, used up all 4 of their nomination changes, but you only used one, I believe. But how about you start by introducing some of your team members?
Yeah, so we were actually intending on using 0 changes. I'm a big believer in pick and stick and, hey, this is my team, come and beat me. But unfortunately, we had an injury to our 52 kilo lifter, Jordan, who competed last year and won the 52 class. So yeah, she hurt her back about 5 weeks out. Had a little bit of load management for a week or two. As she started feeling better again, had another flare up, and then we decided to pull the plug. I think it was about 5 or 6 days before the final round of nominations closed. So I was scrambling to get someone in, and I think it's a bit harder for interstate clubs to get reserves because we have to find someone who's willing to travel or find someone who's in Melbourne on really, really late notice. So the only real option that we had was to bring Claudia in because she was already going to travel for the comp to help me coach anyway. So similar to what happened last year, I filled in similar time frame as well. I was already set to go to Melbourne and I decided to fill in and join the team last minute. So this year is Claudia's turn to do so. So she's our first lifter, 57 kilo class. Initially it was like, cool, we're going to be, having a crack at third or second. And then we had Shay drop down to 57 and Jeslu go up to 57. So that pushed Claudia down the rankings a little bit. Obviously, those guys are fantastic lifters. But I still think it gives us a good chance at getting some additional points and, contributing to the overall. Our next lifter, Kelvin, who you mentioned earlier, lifting in the 83 class. He is someone who's reasonably experienced. Like, he's still pretty young. I think he's only 25. He's probably got like 4 or 5 years of competition under his belt. Recently came fourth at Open Nationals. Very strong lifter. So yeah, that gives us a good leg up in the 83 kilo class with a couple guys who are sort of chomping at the heels if Kelvin has a bad day. Next up, Richard Chalik, who was supposed to be one of our lifters last year. Had to cut him from the team because Bo Modanovic wasn't going to make weight, so Bo had to shift to 93, and then that's why I subbed into 83. So Richie gets his chance this year to come and compete at Team Champs. I've been coaching Richie for 6 years now. He's someone who's pretty experienced. Like, he hasn't done a whole lot of comps in that time, but he's put up some really good totals and he's improved a lot recently. So he'll be certainly pushing for the win in the 93s. And then finally, Charles Kafusi, the only returning member of last year's team in the 120s, recently got the bronze medal at Nationals, totaled 832.5. So I think he'll be pretty tough to beat in the 120. And yeah, that's the team.
You mentioned at the start that you tend to lean towards pick and stick, which I like. I haven't heard that. That's a great term. which I can respect as well. Are you mentioned kind of last minute, it's hard to find reserves. Do you have reserves? Like, do you plan ahead like that and say, hey, this is my 4, but let 1 or 2 other lifters know that there's a chance that if things go awry, that we might have to call you up. So let's start prepping in case, or you don't think of plan B?
So the reserves in this case were Bo Mardonovich, who's obviously already in Melbourne. He actually had to have like a surgery on his nose to like fix his deviated septum like recently. So he recently would have been out as a reserve anyway. And myself, if I needed to jump in for Richie. But outside of that, we didn't really have any sort of plan Bs. So yeah, it's kind of tough when you're not in a physical gym space and you can just like grab someone off the gym floor. Hey bro, you're competing in 3 weeks. Like off we go. We don't really have that luxury. So yeah, maybe it's something that we need to think about in the future. But yeah, I do like the idea of just pick and stick. Like, hey, here's my team. I'm not trying to play silly buggers. And I think it also gives the lifters like it gives them a sense of confidence that's like, hey, coach has picked me a long way out and he trusts me and he expects a good performance out of me. So like, let's do this for the team and I'm here, rather than like, hey, I'm going to put you in, but I also might sub you out. I don't really think that breeds a lot of confidence. So
It's interesting because, obviously this is one thing I like doing is speaking to the different coaches, different strategies. Other coaches and teams have totally different strategies. Like I know Michael of ESS, he'll inform like 8 people and be like, hey, this is our 8. And I'm putting placeholders in for now, but we'll decide exactly the 4 as the day gets closer based on your preps, based on the other nominations. Whereas you've gone kind of the other way where you're like, I've picked 4 and I barely even have a plan B. And I find it interesting that you're leaning towards that pick and stick strategy as someone who is a huge sports fan. Like you're a huge sports fan, I think of like a basketball team will have 5 on the court plus a couple of subs, but the squad is like 40 people or 30 people, whatever it is. Not 30, but whatever it is.
it's like 15, but yeah.
Right. But it's, similar in other sports, right? Like I know NFL's a lot like that. Australian rules, a squad's like 45 players, but only 22 get picked every week. And so you've got this squad that's constantly, or you have a stable squad, but I guess the players that get picked are constantly rotating based on form and based on needs and stuff. Whereas
I think that's true for the sort of fringe players, but the way I see Team Champs is like, hey, this is your best team. Like this is your best 4. And because a lot of the weight classes these days are actually quite competitive, which we'll obviously get to some of the weight class breakdowns later, I don't think you can just like grab anyone and anyone. Like obviously it matters how competitive the particular classes are in this particular comp, but we don't know what the final nominations are going to be. So like you can see, oh look, the 93 class is super stacked, we're going to avoid that, but then all of a sudden the top 3 people just vacate the class. Like you don't know what's going to happen at all. So I figure like, hey, I'm going to put my best lifters that I think will place the highest in their respective weight classes out there, and no matter what happens with the nominations and changes, I leave myself in a good position. Whereas if I'm trying to like game the system in a way like, oh, I'm going to throw a 59 kilo lifter in here who's maybe not as experienced or doesn't have as high a GL or dots as one of my other lifters in a more competitive class, how do I know that class is not going to then get populated because it was empty? Like, 5 other coaches may have the same thought and put in a 59. So there's no like guarantee that even if you do chase one of these lowly populated classes that you're going to get a win. So, my thing is always like, hey, like I'm going to put someone in who's going to be competitive in their class no matter who turns up. And if you can bring someone who can turn up and beat me, then that's totally fine. I'm still going to be happy with where we place.
Do you feel like that exposes you a little bit though, especially like even just saying that out loud? It's like, okay, other coaches know that your team's your team and you're not going to make any changes, and they can rest well knowing that Alex hasn't got anything tricks up his sleeve, and we can target that weight class or vacate that weight class that Alex has lifters in. Like
maybe this is they'll know that Charles ruse for next year.
What's that?
Maybe this is all a long ruse for next year, and I'm going to play silly buggers next year. No,
I was about to say that.
But like, yeah, sure. If you've got a 120 who's going to beat Charles, come and bring him. Let's go. Let's do it.
But it could be the case that you put Charles down as a placeholder, so people don't put in anyone in the 120s knowing they're not going to beat. But then you swap last minute, and someone could have put, so there's all these like meta strategies. I do like the idea of this being a ruse though, and that I wouldn't put it past you.
I guess that's my thing though, is like you can play all these games and you can think that you know what other people are going to do, but because everything is kept private, it's all a mystery. Like there could be all of these last minute changes that we have no idea about, that could affect what we then do. So like if I think I'm making one chest move, but the other person I'm making the chest moves against makes their move at the same time, it's not like you're playing chess. It's not like you make a move and I react to your move. It's like you're literally making your moves simultaneously. So there is no advantage in that because it's hidden.
As a coach who's participating in the system and as a fan of sports in general, how do you feel about it? How do you like that? Do you like that strategy, that meta strategy? Are you a fan of it? And if you could change anything about the way that the nominations gets done, what would you like to see?
I've honestly not thought about it. It's just like, hey, this is the rule set that we're under. Like, let's just play by the rules. That's kind of the way that I've gone about it. I don't have any issues with it. Have you thought about toggling with it?
Well, the first year that we had the challenges and Premier Bracket system was 2024, and that was like name your initial four, and there was no limit to changes. It was just like change as necessary, like literally change as necessary, and so when it came to like the last day, which was 3 weeks out, I had teams totally flip their whole four. Like all four got swapped. There was like one or two teams that did a total like flip flop. And the other thing that happened in that first year, which is a story we've shared numerous times in the past, is that there was also no penalty points for changing weight classes at the last minute.
Yeah.
And so people put in fake weight classes anyway and then change them last minute. And then the story that's been repeated is that Matt Crundle of Crundle Crew had one of his lifters, I forget who, lifting in either the 66 or the 74 class, but hadn't decided, and literally waited for, and they had the lot number advantage, so they waited for Chris Yip to weigh in to find out, is Chris Yip lifting at 66 or 74, and whichever weight class Chris weighed in at, they were going to weigh in the opposite. So it's like, oh, we found out, I forget which weight class Chris lifted in, but oh, Chris weighed in at 66, cool, drink a liter of water, and you're going to lift at 66.8, or Chris lifting at 74, cool, just keep your weight down and we're going to weigh in at 66. So there was like all these crazy tactics, which is why we've introduced the 2 changes up to this date, 2 changes up to this date. I have thought about making it like 2 changes up to the first change and then date, and then 1 change at the final to avoid the chaos. But I mean, very few teams do a double change in that last round anyway.
I think the only thing that I would change is to make it closer to the comp date. Like 3 weeks out seems a little bit far, just in case someone gets hurt or like someone's weight cut is a little bit off, and then you then get forced to make a change and incur points. So that's probably the only thing that I would look at is like, hey, maybe we make it 2 weeks or
it's
1
interesting
week.
you say that, because the 3 weeks comes from, I took that from the IPF rule book about nominations for international events. International events have to confirm 3 weeks out. And I think actually in the latest version
30
of the
days.
rule book, what's that?
It's 30 days now.
I was going to say, I think they've updated it to 30 days. So it's funny you say make it shorter, while the IPF actually gone backwards and made it longer.
Well, I think for them it's more like logistics around planning the length of the groups and figuring out who's in A group and B group and all that kind of stuff. Like that's a little bit more of a job because there's 500 lifters at Open Worlds, not 100. So, but yeah, I mean, I think the only thing that would be worth changing would be, bringing it closer to the comp date, just in case someone gets hurt who was in your initial 4 that you now then have to lose points over. Like, it seems like a bit of a penalty just to swap someone out after that 3-week date.
I would make an argument, though, that also then puts a bit of pressure on the coaches in terms of list management. Like, you've got to manage your athletes. Like, if they're getting hurt, that falls on you. You know, in some sense, of course, all injuries, there's going to be a bit of a luck component to it. But I guess that's where, you know, if you're brazen enough to push your lifters to the absolute like limits and they get hurt, well, maybe you shouldn't have done that, and that kind of falls on you. Or if their weight management's off, then again, that, I guess, like giving them the easy out by saying, okay, you've got 2 weeks or 1 week to the date, gives them a even more license to push the limits.
Yeah, I mean, that's totally fair. I think that there's an element of unpredictability sometimes with injuries, and particularly injuries. Like the weight cut stuff is usually more manageable. But yeah, I mean, it's a much of a muchness. I'm okay with the way that it is now.
You mentioned that the last round of changes, happens all simultaneously. It's like simultaneous chest moves, and I thought it might be time that we kind of preview some of the weight classes that your lifters are in, and we might do them in order. So you mentioned Claudia. She was a late swap into the 57s, which, I mean, Claudia's a very talented lifter herself, but has kind of copped the worst end of all the changes because, as you mentioned, Jess Lou, which wasn't unexpected, coming up from the 52s to the 57s, who's about 40, 50 kilos ahead of Claudia, and then Shea Zaru, who's heaps in front of everybody else. How do you see, talk to us about where Claudia's going to land and how important the results are in that class, because she's going to be the one. She's going to be a result where it could be quite important, actually.
Yeah, so I mean, we're going to cap out at 2 points here. It's going to be fourth is really the ceiling for Claudia in this battle. So I don't think a lot of pressure lies on Claudia because there's only 1 point to gain. Okay. It's not as if she could come first or fifth. Like there's not a huge variance in terms of how many points she can score. But the things we'll be looking at is like, okay, what does Sarah and Yvonne and potentially Annalise total on Saturday? And also, what are their body weights? I'm going to be looking very closely at what their body weights are. We're going to get Claudia to be the lightest of all four, and then we get to pick them off at the end on deadlifts. But yeah, like I said, I'm predicting she'll be fourth or fifth. If she comes fourth, obviously we get 2 points. Fifth, sixth, or seventh, she would get 1 point. So again, not a huge swing. But yeah, that's kind of all I got to say about that, to be honest.
Well, I mean, she's in a weight class competing directly against Sophie Dobson as well, who's one of the teams. She's from Compound, one of the teams that's towards the top. And I think in conversation we've had, you've mentioned how trying to stay in touch with Sophie is important. Of course, you can't control if Sophie finishes first somehow, you can't control that. But it is important that if you avoid dropping too many points directly against Compound Day.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, we don't have any control over that. It will be interesting to see what Jess can total. I imagine Shay will be too far out in front. She'll probably do 460 thereabouts. It will be interesting to see whether Jess can do her best total 426 or 430, 435. And then it will be interesting to see if Sophie can beat that. If Sophie does come second, it's it makes it pretty tough for us to win, given their other placings are pretty much set in concrete. So yeah, we'll be looking at what Sophie can achieve, whether she's second or third. But again, we don't have any direct control over any of that stuff.
In the 83 kilo class, in the session 2 of that day, or session 5, effectively, you've got 3 lifters. So Calvin in 83, you mentioned he came 4th at Open Nationals. He's the top nomination. And I think he's pretty safe at that spot, don't you?
I do. I think Sam Russell and Paul should be both looking up to around 700, which will just mean that we'll have to play our first and second deadlifts to make sure that he wins, and then hopefully have a bit of fun at the end. But yeah, Kelvin's prep's been pretty good. He did go to America for 2 weeks and kind of trained twice in 2 weeks. So that wasn't the best idea, but he seems reasonably close to his peak strength during the prep and should do roughly what he did at Nationals, if not a little bit more. So yeah, I don't really see any of those other guys beating him unless Kelvin has an absolute shocker, which he could because he has bombed a couple times in the past before I started coaching him. So
he bombed a couple of times, not just once?
Yeah, on deadlifts, 2 comps in a row.
Jesus. And I mean, he only got 1 out of 3 deadlifts at Nationals, if I'm not mistaken. And so,
he got 2.
Oh, okay, he got 2. Oh, yeah, he missed a 317 or whatever it was. You mentioned that he just came back from overseas. When did he come back? How much time was it when he landed versus the meet?
He got back Monday last week, so just under 2 weeks out.
Okay, so he's got 2 weeks out, didn't live for 2 weeks prior to that, more or less, 2 sessions. If I'm not mistaken, he's coaching all day Saturday, flying Saturday night. Externals will be externaling.
Yeah, Kelvin's usually pretty busy, and he always trains late. So after 4 days of work and stuff like that, so I'm not concerned by any of that. He'll be fine.
All right, I'm not going to get my hopes up, but we'll see how we go. Of course,
he wants a total he wants a total 750. So if he can do that, he's not going to be beaten.
Well, I want a total 800 kilos, but
yeah, but you're not very strong, John Paul.
All right, why did this have to get personal? We've obviously got Paul Lanes in that class from TSF, and so I have bizarre Delulu thinking that maybe Paul can stretch Calvin to the limit. The 93 kilo class, however, this is the one. I mentioned earlier in the 57 class that there's this Claudia versus Sophie Dobson thing going on, Compound versus Process, but not exactly because they're a bit far apart and they're not really going one-on-one. But in the 93 kilo class, Richie Chalik of Process does effectively go 1v1 with Corey Rowe of Stronghold. And Stronghold, Ballarat, are one of the teams who are the favorites. I'd say arguably the favorite. And so this is the result that's probably like the whole event's going to hinge on, I imagine.
Yeah, I think this is the most important battle of the comp. Corey obviously has the advantage in that he has put up the best total, and it was very recent. So if he can repeat that or add a little bit to that, it does make it hard for Richie. Richie's best total, 727.5, was August last year, and he hasn't had any breaks in training. He's had really good training blocks through that whole period. Obviously, he's been lifting a long time, so the progress you expect from him in that period of time isn't going to be the same as you might expect from someone like Corey, who's a lot newer, but he's definitely better than he was when he did that 727. So it's going to be really close. If Corey has improved, Richie can keep up, but we'll see if he can stretch him too far. Obviously, Richie has the bigger deadlift, so he'll have the final say at the end, and we will put on the bar whatever we need to beat him. I can guarantee that.
As you said, Richie's got the bigger deadlift, will go last, and so that does kind of make your life a little bit easier. One interesting note about this 93 kilo category while we're here previewing it is that there are 10 lifters, and you mentioned to me that five of them are in the challenges, and all 5 of the premier lifters are going to outlift the challengers. And so there's this kind of nice, like, the challengers can have their little fight, and then, the big dog step on the platform the next day, and we'll quite likely blow past all of those challenger lifters.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple guys below Richie as well, Jason, Charles, and Will, who are all improving and are going to be looking at doing 700 or more. So, perhaps one of them can pip Corey and then force Corey. Maybe Corey goes for second, or maybe they pip Richard and we're stuck in third before our final pool. And there's a whole bunch of other things that could happen that could shift the points. So yeah, really excited to see how it all plays out. The battle at the top is obviously quite close, but one of those other lifters could find themselves in the mix if there's a slip up, or if one of them's made a bit of progress in that time.
Of course, you can never discount those other lifters, because a lot of lifters are improving. It's hard to gauge. Some people are quite private. Like I mentioned to you, Paul Lane's nominated total in the 83 kilo class is 640, but he's probably going to do more like 700. And so you just never know if someone's jumping up 40, 50, 60 kilos since their last comp. Or, at this level, even 20 or 30 kilos is enough to really give you a scare. Like you mentioned, if Charles Sanders has a 25 kilo improvement, if he does 715, that's one missed lift. Like if Charles misses one squat, like all of a sudden you're talking about winning and now you're coming third. Like it could just be that tight.
Yeah. Totally. And I think if correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Corey will be one of the first deadlifters out of this group, if not the first deadlifter out of this group. So, he may do his last deadlift and the other guys may all try and beat him, or they may have put themselves in front of him on their second pull. So, it's really going to be interesting to see how the coaches play the strategy.
And you've got another lifter in, just like Calvin, in Charles Kaufusi, who is the heavy favorite and unlikely to drop any points there. Came third at Open Nationals in the 120 kilo category, totaling 832.5, like you said. A lifter who had an awesome battle last year, and with his final deadlift effectively won you guys the event. I mean, albeit it was day one, and so still yet to be seen with day two's results. But Charles Kaufusi, what have you got to say about him?
I've been coaching Charles for 8 years now, so I'd like to get the 8 years of my life back if possible. No, I love Charles. He's the best. He's such a good time, and he's such a larrikin. Like he'll come out and he's just funny to watch lift. He just doesn't take it. It doesn't seem like he's taking it all that seriously. Obviously, he does deeply care about it, and to have put this much time into it. But yeah, I mean, he's immensely strong. He hit his first 300 squat during this prep. He had a crack at a 350 deadlift, which hopefully we'll be able to attempt on Sunday. And yeah, I mean, I don't see a way where Charles gets touched, so it'll just be fun, him just rolling the dice, having a go at a couple of milestone lifts and having a bit of fun.
So there is your team, Process Powerlifting. Reigning champs, 1 out of 4 are back. And again, one of the favorites to end up winning the whole event, or at least get on the podium. I want to zoom out a little bit and just talk about how you see Process's chances overall. I know that the talk of the town right now is Stronghold Ballarat. They benefited greatly from a lot of those last minute changes, with Aaron Tran of ESS leaving the 74 kilo class exactly as Stronghold put in a 74 kilo lifter. And so Stronghold...
You know what, to add to that, if the changes weren't hidden, I wonder if more people had put a 74 and if they knew Aaron was going to vacate, you know what I mean? Like these kind of decisions, and likewise, lifters probably avoided 105 because of Hung. So yeah, if things were public, it would be the way this would have shaken out would have been very, very different. So I actually really like that it is private. It's like here's what we think our best chance is. Like, let's see what you think your best chance is, and then sometimes it just shakes out right for you.
I think also just to comment on that, which is a really good point about like, I don't know, I find it really fun. You know, I know that on that Saturday morning when the changes get announced, everyone's like crowding around their phones and like you're at your gym training and everyone just like crowds around to check what's happened. But I think there's also an element where there is an opportunity, obviously, for like, I don't know, I don't want to use the word collusion because that's very strong, but you know, everyone knows everyone in powerlifting. It's very small circles. A lot of the coaches coach other people. You know, there's all this kind of stuff going on. But I must say that a lot of the coaches who make those changes are actually quite respectful of the system, even though we haven't spoken about it. They're actually quite respectful of keeping it private, relatively private, and saying, "Hey, look, I'm just going to keep this to myself." Like, I think a good example of that is Michael, because Michael mentioned to me early on that he was swapping Aaron out, but he's like, "But I'll like leave it to last minute." He didn't even email me until the day, even though he told me a week prior or 2 weeks prior. Another example of that is Shay. Shay's said in our interview that, you know, she's not taking it too competitively, isn't looking at all the tactics. So she could have easily just told people because it wasn't a big deal. But instead, for this integrity of the event, I suppose, you could argue, kept it to herself because, I don't know, I think it's kind of like the right thing to do maybe. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I think it's up to the coach themselves because this really is a disadvantage for yourself if you reveal what your changes are, because it puts you at it puts other teams at the ability to go, okay, they're making this change, therefore we'll make this one to counter that. So I kind of like, it comes down to the individual whether they're willing to let that information be known, because it's not going to benefit them to make it public. Not. So yeah. I feel like it's almost up to that individual coach.
Let's zoom out a little bit. Like I mentioned, Process, one of the favorites, Stronghold, probably the talk of the town. How do you see things stacking up, and where do you see, I guess, the whole weekend being decided on?
So we mentioned the 93. I think that's a huge part of the weekend. The 57 second place in 57. Again, really, really important. Another thing which I haven't heard a lot of people talk about is Toby Taylor in the 120. I listened to the interview with the Stronghold coach. I can't remember his name. What's his name?
Jacob Roberts.
Jacob. I listened to the interview with Jacob, and he seemed to think that Toby could finish as high as second. And, you know, that's a big variance from where his nominated total is. His nominated total has him in at fourth. So if they can get all the way up to third or even second, that would make them very, very hard to beat, even if Corey doesn't win the 93. So I think that's another thing that hasn't really been spoken about a lot. The other thing I'm interested in is how far Dean can push Tyson. Tyson had some troubles last year on the execution of his lifts, particularly his squats. Very shaky lifter. I think he missed on depth a couple of times. So if he does leave the door open for Dean, there's a possibility that Stronghold lose points there. But I do think, you know, the way that I look at this, and I was explaining this to you yesterday, is how high is the team's floor? Like, what is the lowest points that they could score, you know, provided no one bombs? Stronghold have a very high floor. Compound have a very, very high floor. And I think we have the third highest floor. But the ceiling is the thing that determines, like, you know, whether you can win or not. Stronghold has a very, very high ceiling. They have the highest ceiling. Compound's ceiling is actually only 1 point higher than their floor, and the only real points that they can pick up is if Sophie comes second. Whereas we have sort of 3 points to get, so our floor would be 17 and our ceiling would be 20. Whereas Stronghold could finish up to 22 points, which no one would beat them if they were to get 22. So when I look at like who's the most likely to win, it is probably Stronghold because they need the least amount of things to go their way. And then I guess we have a chance if, you know, a couple of things break our way, and then Compound have a chance if a couple of things break their way. But the other team I think could get on the podium is Melbourne Uni, and you know, they're kind of projected to be a little lower because they have 2 second places that could easily be first places. Like their 52 battle, Misha versus Annabelle, they're only 5 kilos behind on nominated total. Like that could easily be a win for Melbourne Uni. And then the 66 kilo class, their lifter's only 10 kilos below the nominated first place. So that could easily be a win for them too. And if they're able to get 3 first places, even with their 83, who's probably going to be 5th or 6th, that's 19 points for them. So they could be, they could finish second. So yeah, lots of moving is going to occur, on that last day with all those final battles. So yeah, if I were to pick a winner, I'm going to pick us because I believe in my team and I think that we can get it done. Believe in Richie, believe in Claudia. Kelvin and Charles should be pretty comfortable wins. But if I was to pick a team that wasn't my team, I would pick Stronghold.
Yeah, interesting analysis there, Alex. And I think, like as you mentioned, we'd had this conversation where you brought up this idea of floor and ceiling, and I hadn't actually thought of that before. And just to reiterate that, or just to revise that again for our listeners, there are some teams that just have relatively set results, and you mentioned Compound an example of that. Floor to ceiling, only 1 point difference. Caitlin Craw is going to win her weight class, their weight class. Sorry, Abby Drummond going to win her weight class. Isabella Macros probably going to finish second, not going to win, not going to come third. And it's only Sophie Dobson where there's a bit of opportunity for movement. And so they've got like a 1 point spread effectively. From best case to worst case, it's like a 1 point difference. Whereas that Melbourne Uni team, as you mentioned, has a 4 point spread. If they've got those 2 battles where there's a 2 point turnaround, if they both go the wrong way, it's a little bit like Apex last year where those 2 results that just kind of didn't go their way, and then Apex scores 17 points, plus including the volunteer point. Whereas if those 2 results went the other way, it would have been basically a Melbourne Uni result. They could have had 3 wins and they would have topped out the result. So, yeah, definitely a lot of movement going to happen in the Premier bracket. And there are just opportunities for, lifters to go wrong. Like you mentioned, Tyson in the 105s from Stronghold is the easy favorite, but he's also that type of lifter that goes 6 out of 9 or 7 out of 9 or even 5 or 4 out of 9, on a really, really shocking day. He's the kind of lifter that can happen to. I mean, he's also the kind of lifter that can go 9 out of 9 and put up 770. And you're like, holy shit, why did anybody doubt this guy? But when you've got someone that's got volatile results like that, Dean Chen is a good lifter and will put pressure on him. And that'll be awesome because they're the only 2 they're the only 2 105s in the Premier bracket. So they can effectively do a 1-on-1 in that class. But I do have to agree with you that Stronghold are the team to beat. Process is right up there. And Compound, I think it's like those are the 3 teams that people are talking about. And you mentioned Melbourne Uni as being a bit of a dark horse.
Yeah, and I think it's really cool. You mentioned earlier, Compound and Process came from Challenger last year, but so did Melbourne Uni. And last year, Stronghold were no one considered them a threat to win at all. I think they came 6th or 5th last year. I think it was 6th. Like no one would have said, hey, Stronghold, Process, Compound, and Melbourne Uni are going to be the top 4 teams this year. And I think that's really cool that Team Champs can change so much in the course of 12 months.
Yeah, I think Stronghold came 5th. Melbourne Uni Lifting Club actually were in the Challengers, as you mentioned last year, didn't make top 4. They didn't make top 4 of the Challengers bracket. They finished 5th in the Challenge bracket, but still qualified for the Premier bracket nonetheless. Ended up finishing 7th overall, which is a freaking great result. And as you said, are threatening for the overall result, or at least the podium in this year's edition. The Premier bracket looking very, 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 very tight, but the Challengers bracket, and I've said this in a couple of other episodes, is, I would argue, almost more interesting because one thing I've realized is that on the Premier bracket, we're fighting for podiums, but in the Challengers, you're fighting for top 4. And the order of that 4 almost doesn't matter. You just want to scrape in there. You just want to survive, get into that 4, because then you get to lift in the Prem the year after. And it's a really, really hotly contested competition on day 1.
Yeah, I think there's 2 hot favorites to be, almost shoe-ins to move up, and that's Strength Syndicate and Groove Lifting Club. And then after that, the next 3 spots could be any of 4 or 5 teams, which I think is really cool. So the way that I see it, I have Defy making it through, and I have TSF making it through. But then very hot on the heels, Adaptive, Nexus, Stoic Sisters, and then a few teams who are tied on projected 13 points. So yeah, Challenger should be really cool this year. And like we mentioned at the start of the podcast, these teams they get to move up next year and make the Premier even more competitive, which will only make the Sunday competition next year even better. And, it's going to be considerably better this year than it was last year. And then hopefully that just continues to improve in following years.
Yeah, for sure. And I think now's a good time to bring up the fact that we put up a little question box on Instagram just this morning, so not a lot of time to prepare. And we did have a question specifically about the Challengers bracket. And Jasmine asks, do Challengers and Premier directly compete, i.e. do standings from day one shift? Yes, they directly compete. And as we've kind of mentioned a couple of times in this podcast already, those lifters on day two still have to pick off the lifters from day one because they are in the same category and they are competing directly. But it is important to note, and here's an important distinction, that the results on day one are frozen in terms of the promotions and the winner. And so, for example, let's say at the end of day one, like Saturday night, we're going home and TSS, Strength Syndicate, are at the top of the table. They win the Challengers bracket, they get $500 cash, they get promoted. But let's say because they lose all these points, like let's say the next day, Sophie Dobson outlifts Shea Zaru and Will in the 120s loses and Haynes in the 105 loses points. So imagine they just lose all these points, but a team that came second, for example, Groove Lifting Club, who came second on day one, don't lose any points. They managed to preserve their points. So they would flip in the overall standings at the end of day two, but that doesn't change the fact that in this hypothetical, Strength Syndicate won day one. And so the results at the end of day one are effectively frozen.
Yeah, so I got an example of this from the projections. So if we look at Adaptive, they are projected 5th in the Challenger bracket with 15 points. So they got a first place and 3 third places. Then after the Premier bracket lifters lift, all of their lifters would fall to 1 point and they would end up with 4 after the second day. But they could make it into the top 4 and could make it to the Premier, but then could also be equal last on points after 2 days, which I think is like, it's a cool way to do it because it's like you're only competing against the challengers to make it in. And then after that, who cares?
Which is fair enough as well, right? Because those first two, the first day, you can't compete against people you can't compete against, right? Like you can only compete against the people that are around you. And so it does create that. As you said, I think the Challengers bracket is going to be really, really hotly contested. I haven't analyzed it as deeply as I have the Premier bracket, but as we've already discussed, there's a lot of those results where it's like, one lifter misses one lift and another guy who you didn't really consider has a really good day. They've improved a lot and they have a good day on top of that. And then suddenly you drop points. And so there's so many lifters on day one, like there's 60 lifters. There's going to be so many opportunities for that type of 1-2 point turnarounds. And I mean, even looking at your projections, so Alex and I have these projections based on denominator totals. The point scores for 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th are 17, 16, 15, 14. So they're all 1 point away. So it's literally like if one lifter just misses a lift, you gain a point or lose a point. And then
there's 4 teams on 13.
Right. So, yeah, that's a really good point. There's 4 teams on 13. And like you said, I have no doubt, again, without having hyper-analyzed it, a lot of those teams could make up 2 points. Like one of those lifters that's currently nominated in 4th has a good day and ends up winning. And they go from 13 to 15, and then suddenly they're in the mix to get promoted. And so I actually do feel like the Challengers bracket is going to be really, really hotly contested. And it's going to come down to the wire. It's going to come down to that last round of deadlifts.
Yeah, I think the way that I see it, TSS and Groove are both capping out at 2 first places. So if TSF can get 3 first places and tie them on points, they'll actually win the challenges. So that's kind of what I'm projecting will happen, is that TSF are actually going to win the challenges because they're going to tie TSS on 20 points but have 3 first place finishes. So I think Paul and Danielle are going to win. They're currently both projected in 2nd. I think they'll both win, which will put them up to 20 points, which would tie TSS, but they would win because they have that first tiebreaker. So that's my prediction.
I like that prediction, Alex. I like that prediction. It confirms my biases and makes me feel really good about myself. Yeah, I can't help but feel I've got similar feelings. Like that TSS side are really, really strong and have really, really good nominations, but I want to say that we've improved a lot, but so have the TSS guys. Like a lot of those guys have improved. I saw Caitlin Baljak bench 95 recently. Obviously, from TSS, I coach Haynes, and I know he's on the precipice of blowing up his old PB total, which was 665. let me just have a look at how he's looking in the 105s in that challengers bracket. Yeah, he's currently nominated in second behind Mika, but he could win that class against Mika Framin. So I hate to say it 1,000 times, but we'll just have to wait and see. You have to run it through. We've said this before. That's why we love sports, because it has to happen.
Yeah, I think the most important battle the two most important battles in the challenger bracket, 84 plus women and the 105 men. Those two, because the top two nominated lifters are from two of the teams that could win. So Groove TSF and TSS are the lifters who are involved in those ones. That can shift the points. And really excited to see it. I'll be commentating that final session on day one. So I'll be hopefully there'll be a lift to decide it all.
Yeah, as you said, in that 84 plus category, TSF, we have Danny Chang going up against Brachelle of Groove. And so that's the kind of thing where it's like, well, if Danny comes second, we lose 2 points and Groove gains 2 points. Or if Danny wins, we gain 2 points and they lose 2 points. And so, yeah, a lot could happen there. It's also a good time to mention we have another question that came in. I'm just pulling it up now because I've lost it. It's from Compound Training. Jack Hamilton himself says, how would you expand Team Champs if you had even more lifter interest and participation next year? Really good question. I think a lot of the problem comes around logistics. It's such a tightly packed weekend. The absolute cap I could really realistically have is another full day of lifting. So like right now it's 15 teams day one, 11 on day two. Theoretically, we could have 15 on both days. That's 60 lifters both days. That's full 10-hour days of lifting both days. That would fit, again, in theory, but it would also kill a lot of the volunteers. It's just such long days. And I think the important thing to note that I thought about when I got this question was I'd need federation support, because right now the federation don't effectively support me in any way. It's literally just like just like the website to log in and stuff. And like Ardwa does a good job of double checking that the coaches are accredited and all that kind of stuff. But if it was going to get any bigger, it would actually need I'd need more resources effectively. And so I'm very hesitant to make it go past the current number of teams that we have now. And I said this to Alex as well recently. The other thing is just like financial backing. Like if we just had more, again, which is effectively resources. If I had an incredible sponsor, which we already have a great sponsor in Symmetry Physiotherapy, but if I had some oligarch come tap me on the shoulder and said, hey, I love your event and this is really important to me and here's 50 grand, make it even better. The things that we could do. But right now it has to be effectively profitable or at least neutral, at least not cost me anything. And it's very challenging to do so because we're giving away 6,000. We're giving away over a third of the money that comes in from revenue goes to prize money. And then another quarter of the total money that comes in goes to the affiliate fee. And so there's not a lot left on the pie to pay for hiring toilets and trophies and building the stage that we built this year and all the other junk. And so there's a lot of moving parts, as anybody can appreciate. But expanding it is something that's very daunting to me.
What are you mentioned on your story that you're so excited to share what you've got going on this year and you've been working really hard to make it better this year. What are some of the things that you've done this year to make it better?
Well, I think the main thing is just like the presentation of the actual platform. So it's going to be on an elevated stage. The stage is 30 centimeters elevated, and that was built by one of my members, Rich Maurizio, who's a freaking legend. Him and Luke Beaton, another one of my mates and members of the gym. They spent a whole Saturday buying shit from Bunnings and putting this freaking 3.5 meter stage together. And we've got some drapes. We've got curtains that got put around that are going to get placed behind the platform. So rather than the cheapo partitions that we've used in the past, you'll have this like nice like theater kind of feeling behind the platform, as well as a custom banner. We've never actually used a custom banner at Team Champs. It has always felt like a bit of a waste. $400 on a single use bit of material like that feels quite wasteful. But at the same time, I thought that it was a kind of not necessary, but like I don't know. I just changed my mind on it. I thought, okay, it might be worthwhile making that spend and just creating that like aura. And I think as a meet director, it's really important that I try to consider all the parties that are involved. I want to make the lifter experience as good as it can be. I want lifters to say the things that they already say, which is, this was such an emotive experience. I had the best time. You know what Claudia said on your podcast yesterday. It's so much fun. Like, that's what I want lifters to say. I want coaches to say, it's seamless, it's easy, I feel comfortable, the warm-up room's got enough space. I want spectators to say, I was my eyes were glued on the stage. I couldn't look away because it was such a great spectator experience. I want volunteers to, I want everyone to really have a good time. And so it can be hard because a lot of the times there's competing needs, especially in our space, it's quite small. The coaches want more warm-up space, but that takes away space from the spectators. And the spectators are like, it's really crowded. I can't see because the platform is really low. So we put the platform elevated, and then maybe the lifters will complain. I don't know. There's always going to be like competing needs. But that's the main thing is like for me, like the presentation of the stage and the platform kind of elevates it for everybody. It creates this aura for the lifters. It makes the spectator experience way better. And this is a really big comment, which I don't know how many people are going to be listening this deep into the podcast, but you've ever gone to a local powerlifting meet, if you're 5 people back, you can't see shit. You can't see what's going on over the heads of the referees when it's at ground level, but being effectively 33 centimeters elevated, even if you're at the back, you'll be able to see. You'll be able to actually enjoy the spectator experience. And so like these types of details are the kinds of things that I try to think about and try to improve.
Yeah, I really like the idea of the personalized banner too, because every time anyone posts content from this competition, even if they're using it as like a B-roll in coaching content, it's like you're getting promotion. They're like, hey, this happened at my competition. Mm-hmm. And I think that's important. I really like that.
Yeah, I think so too. I think the funny thing is like we've hosted like 25 comps at TSF now, and you look at old photos and it's hard to tell which one this is from. Like which comp was this from? Was this Birthday Bash 7 or 8? Was this TSF Open 2017 or 2019? Like I can't remember. And so the custom banner will be good. It'll look sick. And yeah, the spectator experience will be really good. I mean, last year we had live feed out in the spectator area, like outside, not a delayed live feed, like a direct live feed, which made it a little bit easier to watch. Those small kind of details, I think will make it really, really good. But in terms of how would Team Champs expand, it's going to require money, effectively cash.
Could you do a double platform on a Challenger day?
I just don't have enough space for it, man. Like we just don't have enough space. I think even the Challenger day gets packed. So double platform is probably out.
You need to go external venue.
Which is just drives up the cost big time, right? I mean, you guys would know running SPD Cup and external venue. You've got the actual venue hire, logistics, hiring trucks, moving stuff, all the kind of stuff. So it just gets.
Have you thought about tiered seating?
I have thought about tiered seating. I looked into grandstand hire and hiring like a mini grandstand, like tiered seating. It was going to cost like $1,000, and then I realized, well, if I just build a stage, then that's effectively tiered seating because then everyone can see at least better. And we can keep it and we can just reuse it at every comp effectively, and it makes our life a little bit easier. But I definitely thought about tiered seating because again, that just creates the spectator experience, like makes the spectator experience a little bit better. So good question there. Good question. Team Champs 2026, it's on this weekend. All the info, it's important to note for everybody listening, all the info can be found on the Instagram. That's the best place to go. At TSF Team Champs. There's a link in the bio, which has got links to everything, whether it's like where the live streams are going to be, the lifter info, the nominations, the scoreboard, the team scoreboard, like all of it's there on the Instagram account. If you're not on Instagram, you can go to the website, thestrengthfortress.com/TSF Team Champs, and you'll find all the information there. All the spectator information's there, lifter information. I've tried to make it as easy as possible. I still get emails constantly saying, hey, can I come to the event? I'm like, yes, you can come to the event. All the information's there. But yeah, it's going to be
as
a great
per
weekend.
My email.
Well, yeah, as per my 50 posts on Instagram, every podcast I've done, all my emails. It's all happening this weekend. Alex, anything else that you want to share, add, or touch on before we wrap things up here?
I'd like to shout out to all the coaches who are competing at Team Champs. If you want to do a boat race at the after party, come and find me and we'll organize one.
A boat race?
Team boat race.
Like rowing boats?
Do you know what boat race is?
What? No, I don't know what this is.
It's like a drinking competition.
Okay, there we go. Okay, there we clarified it. Okay, good one. What's involved, Alex?
So you line up 4 people, you each have a full drink, and you race like as a team. So it's like extended Team Champs, drinking Team Champs.
This sounds like cosplaying Team Champs lifting. Wait, you need 4 people in the team? Well, that's convenient because I've got 4 that I've lined up.
Exactly, right. There's 4 right here.
Oh, that'd be great. All right, I'm looking forward to that. That's a good segue into the fact that we've got our after party, which is going to be great. Hosted by Groove Lifting. Thank you very much, Groove Lifting. Alex, it's been a pleasure to chat to you, previewing this comp. It's always a great time chatting to you and getting your insights. as I've mentioned numerous times, very experienced, very, very intelligent, and very analytical. So I think a lot of the other coaches and lifters enjoy listening to you speak and gaining some insights into the way your brain works and the way that you look at powerlifting. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, sir.